Welcome to 5 Minute Fridays. My name is Jim Putnam. In these videos, we go through something that we're doing in our garden at that particular time. So just kind of timely videos on things you might be thinking about in your garden. The weekly garden planner is available over on our website. It's $50 off through the month of March, and it is a week-by-week detailed description of what you might do in your garden. And then we have a video to kind of translate that to other areas of the country, because in this video, we're going to be digging up some perennials and dividing them and talking about that. This may be a little early for you in Michigan to be doing this because the ground may be frozen. But here in the South, as we're getting toward, officially spring in a few weeks, but it's, we're getting 65, 70 degree days now. These perennials are going to start to wake up. So this is a good time to pop any of them out of the ground that you may need to divide or move or rescue or whatever in some way or another. The one thing I think about in gardening is when I do consultations, I'll frequently be in a consultation and I can look at shrubs and just kind of tell how old they are. When shrubs reach about 20 years old, they have a certain look to them. And I think you either need to reset them or transplant them or do something to kind of regenerate them or replace them. Trees we plant to be permanent pieces in our gardens, but perennials, herbaceous perennials like this hosta that I'm going to run my mouth about for a while before I dig out of the ground, every 3 to 5 years, they kind of need to be popped out of the ground and divided because they either ultimately crowd themselves out and are just not as productive as they once were in some way or another, or conditions change. A tree gets bigger in that space, and so your perennial that needed full sun is now stretching, whatever it is, or something's just gone wild. It liked the area a little too much and we need to tame it. We're going to do that as well in this video. So I'm going to jump right in. This hosta is basically under this hydrangea, and so it just needs to be moved out a little further from it, and we may take the opportunity while we have it out of the ground to to divide it as well, to cut it in half. And there's a video on the channel for dividing hosta. If you want to go and look at all the thoughts on dividing hostas, there's a video for that on the channel. In this video, I'm just going to show you, I'm just going to pop this thing out of the ground. If you know there's going to be something that you need to move or rescue in some way, you may want to mark them in the fall in some way or another, because this hosta is completely dormant right now. And if it wasn't for the flower spikes it had on it last season, it would be hard for me to identify where it is. So keep in mind, if there's something you're going to have to do like this, before it goes to sleep in the fall, mark where it is. So these things are really quite easy, to pop out of the ground typically. And except for there's a red bud here that is running a lot of roots through this area. You don't have to worry too much about making a mistake with something like a hosta or daylily or any of the really kind of tough perennials in your garden. I think that's it right there. Okay, so doesn't look like much now, but you can see where new growth is starting on this right now. It's a little early, so we're not seeing as many. There's one spot right there I can see that's starting to come up, and there'll be more here the next. Oh, there's one right there. One little spot right there where you can see new growth is starting from underground. So a couple things. While I have it out of the ground, I basically just wanted to move it over a foot, kind of rescue it from this hydrangea. But while it's out of the ground, if I want to, I can saw this in half. I can cut it with a sharp knife, or I can just take my shovel and what will seem very mean, turn that into 2 very nice hosta plants. And I could get greedy here and get probably 8 if I wanted to. But there you go. And I can take those 2, just put them back in the ground. The main thing here is when they go back in the ground, I want them at the same level they were before, okay? So make sure you're not planting them too deep when you replant them. It's pretty easy to do sometimes if I dig this hole really deep, okay, like this, and I put this soil back in here underneath it, that soil is going to settle some. So keep in mind that if you put this on soft soil, this plant is going to sink like that in time. Maybe you can see that, but I sunk that down about 3 inches. The plant's going to do the same thing and ultimately be a little too deep. So make sure you tamp that soil underneath it a little bit if you have dug a little too deep. And that's it. 2 brand new hostas. One could go to a friend. They could go in containers for a little while. I could cut them again into 8 and then put them back in the ground, just making sure that I'm not covering anything that wasn't covered before. We have a bully over here, and we've talked about it for a couple years now. This rhythm and blues salvia. It's very similar to black and blue salvia and a bunch of other salvias that are very similar, where they have a really dark purple flower, gets about this tall, really dark purple flower with kind of a black calyx on it. So, you know, but 4 foot tall. This one can become a bully in the garden pretty quickly. It goes to sleep and seems fine and seems tame, and then when it wakes back up, it's crawled 3 feet back in here in the bed and popped back up. So it'll be, you know, in our shrubs back here, and we've kind of just gotten to the point where we're just over it. We're gonna move it, we are gonna keep one little clump of it in a spot that's really, really tough because it's a tough perennial. So we're gonna match it up with an equally tough spot to grow in. And the rest of it, you know, we can give away, put in containers, or probably do people a favor and get rid of it. Because again, it was like a good 2-year run with this one. And I will say that if you have a contained space, you had a sidewalk or, you know, some place where you could contain it a bit, really fantastic salvia for hummingbirds and native bees as well, native bumblebees. They don't have a proboscis that'll get down in the flower, so they just drill a hole in the side of it and cheat the system a bit. And so good for native bees. But this thing is really a beast. And I can do this, and you can see I don't know if you can see the whole ground move there. It's just a solid mat of roots. And so this thing is gonna require coming in here and actually almost like sod. It's almost like turf here, and going under this and trying to get, and I'll never get it all in one shot, but I'll go, it's a rock that's bugging me. It's already started to break dormancy too, but I need to go under this like this, all the way across there, and just try to get, and then I can cut kind of squares out of it, just like I would be pulling up sod in the garden. Did I get it? Not quite. So there's one. Huh? Yeah, the roots are just wild on this. You see this? It's just matted together. It's just wild. See it coming back. New growth right there. I think you can see that. But look at that. It's just a solid mat of roots. And I'm not going to get it all, but I can get the vast majority of it. It's easier while it's still moist out here and before it really starts coming back. But that's what I need to do. Just go all the way across here and just keep putting this shovel underneath it, lifting it up like that. And then I can cut a square or whatever. And there's another piece of it. But isn't that wild how aggressive that thing actually is? If you see any other root pieces down here, you probably want to get them. Turn this over a bit. That salvia is definitely coming back over there. I definitely did not get all the roots. I peeled up a good portion of it, and I probably am 80% there, right? But I can't see it all, and so some's gonna pop up. And as soon as it pops up, I just have to deny it light. I have to keep chopping it off, and digging out those rest of those pieces. I'll win, but you're not gonna win completely while it's dormant. Even that hosta I dug up over there, it's within the realm of possibility that there's gonna be a piece of that hosta still there, and it's gonna pop up later, and I can decide if I wanna keep it there. Maybe it's a good spot for it anyway, and it's no big deal. A free plant, right? But that one can also be dug up later. I did a video, one of these 5-minute Fridays, on pruning evergreen perennials. So we went through and cut the old leaves off the hellebores, and some of the carex we cut back. We don't always have to cut it back here, but the winter was a little bit rougher on them this year. So we cut some of the carex back, and we also cut back cast iron plants, which was just a matter of going in here and getting the worst of the leaves cut back to the ground. This is the time of year they flower frequently. So it's kind of fun to come down here in your cast iron plants and see if there's any flowers. I actually don't see any on these right this minute. But interestingly, also the time to divide these. So if you want to get in, if I wanted to get in here and pop this cast iron plant out of the ground, I could probably, at this point, this one's gotten spread enough now that I could probably get 6 or 8 plants out of it. These are so slow growing that I really don't want to do that. I probably would not get that greedy with a cast iron plant, just because, you know, with a hosta, I can cut that thing into 6 or 8 plants, and within a reasonable season or two, have them back pretty full. If I cut this into 6 plants, I'm gonna be 3 years getting any of them back to this size. So probably wouldn't try to get more than 2 out of it if I needed to. If it's starting to overcrowd itself over here, if this shrub has now gotten too close to it and I just simply wanna move it out, I could do that right now. Same thing with this carex. If I wanted to pop this Ribbon Falls carex out of the ground, this would be the time to do it. And then, you know, I can choose to cut it. I can just transplant it, or if I'm looking at it and go, this thing's gotten so bulky that I think it would be better kind of regrowing and refreshing itself, I could just go ahead and cut it in half or cut it into fourths, something like that. But this would be the time to do it. Every one of these 5-minute Fridays, I've been pointing out that while you're in these things and you're doing these jobs, you'll probably find some sort of weed, noxious weed that's been planted by a squirrel or whatever. This solidago, this fireworks solidago, has done brilliantly here on the other side of this fence. But you can see it's gone from a little quart pot that was about that big around to about a 2x2 space here. I'm actually not going to dig this one out and divide it yet, but I think next year it's definitely a candidate for that. But this is an example of being able to buy one plant that went right there, and now I could probably get 8 more of these out of this, give them to a neighbor, friend, do whatever with them. We don't cut some of these native pollinator plants back because some things overwinter in them. So I haven't cut it back yet. That's why it looks like it does now. We'll cut it back once it starts generating some new growth on it. But this fireworks solidago or goldenrod, I have a couple options on how I could divide this. I could actually just come through here and just absolutely cut it with the shovel, straight down through the middle, okay? And then dig this side out, just like that, and leave this side in place. Or I could go under here and get the entire thing out of the ground and then divide it into 8 or 10 pieces. So there, you've got a lot of options here on something that's spread this much as to how you can take it out of the ground without, and you won't hurt it at all. It won't miss a beat. Digging it out and dividing it like that. I love this plant, and we may end up dividing a piece out of it and putting it over here in the new native garden. But that's here's a great example of a perennial that hasn't reached the point yet of being overcrowded, but it's on its way to doing so. This spot initially, when we started this project, was quite sunny, but the vitex up here above it and the magnolia, Stella ruby magnolia that's behind it has now shaded this space out a bit, and it's now kind of a moist, shady space. And it actually has given us the opportunity to come in here and, the garden can evolve in time. We've actually acquired a few ferns for this space, okay? But this Salvia gregii would definitely like more sun. And so it's thin and kind of sparse here from last year. This is one I'll just come in here, dig underneath it and pop it out of the ground and take it to a sunny spot, and it won't miss a beat. The other thing that's here is some ajuga. So we knew going into last year that this was a bit shady. And again, I know I got to get in here and get some leaves off these ground covers. We knew going into last year it was shadier over here. And this ajuga was in tiny pots and it hit the ground running. If we wanted to cover more space with any of our ground covers, this would be the time of year to get in here and dig them out. So again, exactly like I was showing you on that over there with the solidago, I could probably just cut this in half in place and dig out half of that plant. Okay, or again, I can pop the whole plant out of the ground and be a little more precise and get, you know, I think easily 1, 2, 3, 4 plants out of that plant, and then space them out more evenly in here, or move them over to a space that I'm going to try to fill in the future. But again, kind of a money saving thing there, where you can get just 1 or 2 of these ajuga, plant them, and kind of create a farm for, you know, you're basically creating a farm space where you can farm them in the future. And after just a single year, I can come in here and I can go from the 5 plants we bought to probably 25 plants today pretty easily. So this is a great time of year to do it. I say this is a great time of year to do it, but I would do it based on, like in the Gulf Coast and up to about us, definitely the time to do it. You know, further north, you might wait a little bit longer on this, and be careful moving your perennials to really wet spaces. So if it's still really wet outside, or the space you're moving your perennial to is really wet, you may want to wait a little bit longer to before you dig them out of the ground and do it. But there you go. There's 5 Minute Friday on. It's time to move, divide, make decisions, rescue, you know, our perennial plants in the garden, whether they're evergreen or ones that kind of hide under the ground. Thanks for watching.